The Lost Art of Forgiveness. When will I get to the other side of the river? It's been a long walk to get to this river. I'll just put my bags down here and take a nap under this tree. Huffed Leander to himself. He would have loved to jump into the water, but it was flowing so rough and rugged, he thought, not while he was so tired from his journey. Plus, he didn't really trust the people who were giving him the side eye from a distance, looking at him and his bags and at the same time looking like they're not looking. He rested under the tree with one eye half open for a short while. Waking abruptly with a burst of adrenaline caused by a very loud human talking about him and yelling around him about his bags, he sat up with a start. Before his mind could really comprehend anything in particular, there was a distinct sense of being under attack if he didn't quickly remove something. You can't leave all this here. We won't allow it. No bags, no bags, no bags. That is the rule. Don't leave your bags. The brutish man shouted at him. Leander only wanted to rest by the river under the tree. He'd been carrying his bags for miles and miles from a far-off distant village where he'd been living for many years. He'd embarked on this long journey to see how far he could travel and what he might find that's different to his previous life. The river was only an obstacle. Leander had a dream to cross the river and travel further on the far bank and beyond. Oh, thank you for the explanation, sir. I will surely not leave any bags here. He'd not actually done any calculations regarding how he would cross through the river to get to the far bank. He looked toward his new destination from under the tree. He sat with his knees comfortably tucked under his arms, and he rested his chin on his hands and contemplated his next move. Surrounded by many different bags, which he had managed to stack and pack on himself as he walked, he thought about his options. The river was still raging. He thought about how long he should wait. It had already been hours and still it raged. Also, he saw no one swimming in the river. He looked around and it seemed that the river was being ignored by the people on his bank. Perhaps no one ever swam in the raging river. It seemed to have the energy of a wall. Leander considered himself fit for swimming, decided to try his luck in the raging river. He left his bags on the bank and suffered the looks from people in the distance about them. He jumped in feet first and almost lost himself to the cold chill of the rushing water. He tried to stand. Nope, that wasn't happening. While he was trying to find his footing, he realized he was very quickly about 200 meters further down than where he began. He swam with all his strength to reach the bank again and pulled himself out with the help of a fallen tree branch still connected to its source. While walking back to his bags, he could feel the whispers. He assumed they were for his display of courage, which the bank dwellers likely thought of as stupidity. He looked at his bags. He looked at the water. He sat. He thought, well, this is a problem. How do I get these, he pointed to his bags, then to the far bank, over to there, and myself too? The answer didn't come easily. It took quite a while, actually. In the end, he decided to take one bag at a time, and he would find a more shallow part of the river. After finding his crossing place, taking a few hesitant and yet exploratory steps, Leander held a medium-sized and weighted bag over his head and began his swim. He was confident once he'd reached the middle of the river quite safely. He then, without warning, stepped forward into a hole. He fell in his upright position, straight down. His head was now under water, his mind wondering what the heck happened, while he held his breath tightly. The only part of him above the water was the bag, soon not to be. He was taken by the river, and the bag had to be sacrificed to keep his life. Soaked through, tired and quiet, Leander was in shock. His solution wasn't going to work. Might he choose to lose every single bag in the same way and risk his life too, over and over? He could, of course, halt his journey and take his long and distant views of the far bank home with him. Would this lost fantasy torture him more than the river could? He just knew he shouldn't go home. He couldn't carry the bags across the river. He knew he could swim alone, perhaps once or twice. He didn't want to leave his bags behind, nor was he allowed to. What other option did he have? He took his time to find a solution. While sitting gazing blankly at the water, he contemplated his bags. What was inside that bag the river gobbled up? He realized slowly he could only name a few things which he remembered packed in all of the bags in total. Leander found those few items he knew he wanted to keep and strapped them to his body, under his clothes, so as not to lose them. He had found his third option. The bags are going into the river. Yet he couldn't afford to hang on to them and risk his life. He decided to pick up each bag, confident he wouldn't miss what he hadn't needed nor remembered for many weeks of travel. He walked lovingly over to the edge of the riverbank and gently placed a bag into the river with love and compassion. He watched it flow away with current. He felt a little choked up. While walking back to the pile of bags, he began to understand his feelings. Each bag was given to the river, knowing the emotional detachment was an historic moment in his personal journey. The last bag was one he had carried in his hands while walking, and so he carried this little one with him into the river as he immersed himself. He let it go down the river with love and then psyched himself up to do the swim across to the bank of enlightenment. While giving his swimming effort attention, he felt the understanding of having been in ignorance. He was swimming through awareness and would soon come to enlightenment. How long did it take Leander to get from one side of the river to the other? Did it matter? The time it took was determined by his realizations and decisions. Ultimately, this is what is called timing. Let me explain the difference between time and timing. At 3 p.m, Sarah is going to see a band play in the park. The rest of the audience would begin to gather at 2:30 p.m, and the performance would run for 1 hour. She would be home before dinner time. All of these statements are about time, not about timing. When Sarah arrived at the park, she saw a bunch of her friends walking to the performance space from the other side of the park. What great timing, she thought. When the band began playing, she could hear the driving beat of the drums and the bass player. They played as if they were one instrument with several different sounds. The groove was so solid it moved in her body. Then the piano jumped in to play a melody, and it was as if the pianist was already playing silently before the audience could hear the sound. The melody just fit perfectly into the rhythm already present. Then, when the singer began, it was so perfectly placed inside the spaces left by the other band members. Everyone felt the entire sound as one. Nothing stood out, but everything could be heard if you listened with focus. This description is not about time at all, but all about timing. Leander's story about crossing the raging river of awareness wasn't about how long it took him. It was about the experience and what it challenged him to understand and then decide upon. This is just the same way we can live our lives, if we see it this way. It's a true choice. While we are relaxed and open to these ideas, we have the opportunity to decide whether we wish to see all of life as many rivers, where we begin in a state of ignorance, having decided on the outcome and the manner in which it must happen. With a little trying, it all becomes a bit of a struggle, and we have to make a compromise. Eventually, after wrestling with the way the situation is being, because we decided it should be otherwise, we realize we've been swimming through awareness, and to finally reach the outcome, we must give up one of the two aspects we had our hearts set on. Truthfully, it's our egos that are attached to the what and the how. Yet, to climb up into enlightenment, we actually have to only keep one of these two aspects. In realizing how co-creation works, our ego will make a choice. To still have what we want, we must give up on how it will come to be. Which way do you wrestle the river? Are you easy to give up your how to be able to get your what? I feel it took me at least 10 years to truly accept, even while stepping into awareness, that I was not going to attach to the how. That was 10 years of doubting the creating. I was brought up without the creating, so I had to wrestle many times. I was given seemingly never-ending tests and lessons to teach me what a truly truthful and loving relationship is, that I had to not hang on too tight, or else I would lose and feel battered. If I held out to the Creator what I was attached to, had a little tear and said goodbye to it, I might lose it, but I wouldn't feel battered, and I would receive the what and be enlightened by the mystical and majestical nature of the how shown to me. I'm fairly sure there has been not one time of testing where I've not been mind blown by the creating's finesse. I have crossed over so many raging rivers of awareness in my conscious journey of almost 20 years. Life is much more quiet now, and sometimes I look up to where I like to place the imagined face of my mother and think to her that I wouldn't mind another one just to keep me sharp and up to date. I should also remind myself to be careful what I ask for. Here are some questions you might want to reflect on. I suggest you answer each in your mind, or better yet, leave a note for yourself, like a text message, and then come back and retest in a year. Your answers might be like night and day. How big and treacherous is your river? This one is dependent on your perspective. Right now, your river might seem too hard and too far to swim. But if you learn how to swim, how to give your bags to the river, etc., your perspective might just change enough for you to get to the other side of that river that's facing you. How long will it take you to swim rather than splash around? This question is not about your perspective of the river before you, but your commitment to yourself. So ultimately, it is reliant on your perspective of yourself. How strong and brave are you? This question is designed to help you realize how and with whom you are comparing yourself to. Also, to bring about awareness to your own excuse-making skills. How badly do you want a new life on the other bank? This last question is designed to bring you to awareness of your desire and the urgency and need you are placing on it. Of course, there are many factors which you can investigate to bring you to a more intense perceived need. When will you get to the other side of the river? I think you realize now it does depend on how long you must wrestle with each phase of learning. For me, life is always about learning. We learn so we can live. I continue refining my learning so I can live well, always. I'd like to tell you a little idea I received from my Hawaiian kumu. He used to tell it in a joking way, but I understood the seriousness. I was working my way through my rivers of awareness, learning how to identify what I was holding firmly to, and then convincing myself to let go of down the river. I was always driven this way. I also knew no one else around me was. As disappointing as that was, that none of my fellow students were wanting to walk the long road, I never stopped learning. This is how Kumu Lawrence explained it to his students. You Howleys all want to get to Z, but no one wants to do the ABCs. That was it. He said not much more. At the time, I was in the thick of dealing with the first few letters of this alphabet of ours. I did yearn to move through, and I wanted to get to Z, but I was willing to do what it took. I think I surprised my kumu with how diligent I was, likely more than he was. There were many letters he'd skipped over. I allowed him to save face, and yet we both knew what he was doing. The question for all of us is, how much do we want to live via the Z? If we want a closeness with the creating, we have to move through the lessons hidden in each letter of the alphabet. We must learn to accept the lessons that are before us. We must ask for the next letter. In my experience, once we get past halfway, we understand the inherent benefit of letting go of what we hold tight to for our ego's perception of safety and control. On the other side of the halfway mark, we start to know how much more safety and love there is without having to control everything from our side of the connection. Forgiveness is how you get across your rivers. Forgive the pain you felt. Forgive the parents who were part of the setup. Forgive the brother who told you horrid things to make you cry. Forgive the aunt who was jealous of you. Forgive the teacher, the school, the friend, the lover. Mostly, forgive yourself for hanging on for as long as you did. Forgive yourself for not yet knowing enough or not knowing yourself better than you did. If you can learn why forgiveness is the key, you'll get across the rivers much more safely. Forgiveness is not weakness. True forgiveness is the greatest strength you can ever develop. Regardless of what lessons and tests the world provides you, you don't need to hold on to a grudge, anger, hate, or even mistrust. Why? Because you've learned the lesson. You're not going to be surprised the next time the world provides you with another test. You've learned the answers, and if not, you have learned that you can, and you will. So make forgiveness a habit, and you'll walk through life a lot more lightly and kindly. Hi, I'm Joanna Ruth from Tarot with JoannaRuth.Online. Hi, I'm Joanna Ruth, and this is your doorway to spiritual literacy. Why not come on in and learn some foundations together?